The road stretched ahead in a ribbon of wet black, glistening under the weak reflection of Naomi Harris's headlights. Midnight in rural Georgia could be as silent as a church pew or as restless as a storm. Tonight, it was the latter. Rain lashed against the windshield in silver streaks, wipers working overtime to keep her view clear. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles pale under the pressure, not because of fear, but because she was tired, bone-deep tired. Her cleaning shift at the Tall Pines Inn had ended an hour later than usual. Guests had checked out late, leaving a mountain of sheets, towels, and trash for her to manage. Now, the smell of bleach still clung to her hands despite the quick wash in the staff bathroom. In the back seat, Maya, her 12-year-old, was curled up under a blanket, earbuds in, lips parted slightly in sleep. Next to her, 8-year-old Lila had her head tipped to one side, her curls a small halo against the window. Naomi's thoughts wandered as she drove, counting the days until the next rent payment was due, the bills waiting in a small pile on the kitchen counter. The heater in the old sedan hummed weakly, and a faint rattle from the glove compartment reminded her the car was overdue for repairs, but she told herself the same thing she always did. We'll make it work, we always do. The flash of twisted metal pulled her out of her thoughts. It was sudden, a glint of chrome against black, a shadowed lump just beyond the guardrail. At first she thought it was debris, maybe a deer hit earlier in the night. But as she slowed, the image became clearer. It was a car, or what was left of one. The front end was crumpled in on itself, steam or smoke curling upward into the rain. She pulled over without hesitation. Hazard lights clicked on, casting pulses of amber across the wet road. Her boots splashed through puddles as she stepped out, rain instantly plastering her jacket to her skin. She could smell the sharp tang of gasoline mixed with the acrid heat of metal. Through the shattered windshield, she caught sight of movement. A man slumped over the steering wheel. His hair was damp with blood, his chest rising and falling shallowly. The driver's door was warped, the frame bent inward. Naomi called out, her voice barely carrying over the rain, but he didn't respond. Instinct took over. She yanked on the handle. Nothing. The metal groaned under her pull, but it didn't budge. Heart pounding, she crouched low and peered inside. His lips moved, barely, and she caught fragments. Phone. Coming after. Can't. Before his eyes rolled back. She ran around to the passenger side, managed to wrench the door open, and leaned in. He was heavier than she expected, his expensive suit jacket slick with rain. She got her arms under him, bracing her legs and hauling him out inch by inch. As she pulled him clear, a hiss rose from the engine, followed by a sharp pop. She didn't look back. She just kept moving toward her car, each step dragging. She got him into the back seat beside her sleeping daughters, who stirred but didn't fully wake. The man's head lolled against the seat. His breathing was shallow but steady. Naomi slid into the driver's seat, glanced once at the smoldering wreck in her mirror, and hit the gas. The nearest ER was 20 minutes away. She drove like she was back in her 20s, hands sure, eyes sharp despite the rain. The man didn't speak again, but his fingers twitched now and then, as if holding on to something in a dream. Naomi's own heart slowed as the glowing red cross of the hospital came into view. She didn't know who he was, why his words had been laced with fear, or what might happen next. All she knew was that he was alive, and tonight, that was enough. The hospital's automatic doors slid open with a tired sigh, letting in a gust of wet air as Naomi hurried inside. Her arms were hooked under the man's, dragging more than lifting, his weight a test of her strength. The ER was nearly empty, a quiet hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the scent of antiseptic cutting through the lingering smell of rain and gasoline. A nurse looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening. "We need a stretcher," she called, her voice sharp and clear. Two orderlies appeared within seconds, their shoes squeaking against the linoleum as they guided Naomi to lay him down. She stepped back, breathing hard, her jacket dripping onto the floor. The man was wheeled away, his face slack under the harsh hospital light. A nurse turned to her, clipboard in hand. "Name? Relation?" Naomi shook her head. "I don't know him. I just found him on the road. His car." She gestured vaguely toward the doors, toward the dark highway beyond. "It was bad." The nurse scribbled something, nodded. and moved on. That was it. No drama, no gratitude, just the hum of machines and the rush of people doing their jobs. Naomi didn't mind. She wasn't here for thanks. She went back outside to her car, the rain now a lighter drizzle. Maya was awake, leaning over the front seat. "Mom? Who was that man?" "I don't know, baby. Someone who needed help." She brushed a damp curl from Maya's forehead. "Go back to sleep. We'll be home soon." The drive back felt longer. The adrenaline that had fueled her earlier was gone, replaced by a deep ache in her arms and a hollow space in her chest. She kept replaying the sound of his voice, the fractured words, the fear in them. People coming after him. It didn't make sense, but it clung to her thoughts like burrs. By the time she pulled into the small gravel driveway of their apartment building, the girls were fully asleep again. Naomi carried Lila inside first, her little body heavy with the limp weight of deep rest, then came back for Maya. The apartment smelled faintly of last night's dinner, rice and beans reheated twice, and the heater rattled in protest as she turned it up. She peeled off her wet clothes, hanging them over the back of a chair, and sat for a long moment at the edge of her bed. The rain outside had softened to a steady patter, and through the thin walls, she could hear a neighbor's TV playing low. She told herself it was over now. She'd done what anyone would do. The man was safe. Her girls were safe. Life would go back to its normal rhythm. But it didn't feel that simple. Something about his face, pale under the flicker of hazard lights, stayed with her. And those words, "People coming after me," whispered through her thoughts as she finally lay down, exhaustion pulling her under. The next morning came early. Naomi woke before the alarm, her mind already ticking through the day ahead. Lunches to pack, a leaky faucet to report to the landlord, an extra shift at the inn. She moved quietly, not wanting to wake the girls, and for a while, the night before felt like a strange dream. Until she saw the small damp stain on her jacket where his blood had seeped into the fabric. It was real. And whether she liked it or not, the stormy night on that highway had just cracked open a door to something she couldn't yet see. 4 days passed before Naomi heard anything. She had almost convinced herself that the man in the wreck was just another face in a world full of stories she would never know. Life was demanding enough without taking on someone else's troubles. She woke early, worked her shifts, made sure the girls had what they needed, and collapsed into bed each night with the kind of exhaustion that left no room for wondering. But on Thursday afternoon, as she was mopping the lobby floor of the Tall Pines Inn, the glass doors swung open with a quiet chime. Naomi glanced up and froze. It was him. Clean-shaven now, wearing a dark wool coat that looked expensive even in the gray light, Daniel Whitaker stepped inside. His presence seemed to shift the air. The lobby, with its scuffed tile and worn-out armchairs, suddenly felt smaller. His eyes, pale, sharp, but softened somehow, landed on her and didn't move. "You're Naomi Harris," he said, his voice low but certain. "You're the one who pulled me out of that car." Naomi straightened, leaning on the mop handle. "I didn't think you'd remember much. You were in bad shape." "I remember enough." He took a step closer. "I've been trying to find you." She blinked, unsure what to say. Guests had passed through this lobby with expensive watches and diamond rings, but they rarely noticed the woman with the mop. Now one of the wealthiest men in the state was looking at her like she mattered. It was unsettling. He explained that his assistant had tracked her down after she refused the check sent to her address, a detail she barely remembered tossing in the trash, the ink still smelling faintly of money she didn't want. "I wanted to thank you in person," he said. "Not just for pulling me out, but for leaving before anyone could make it about money." Naomi felt her cheeks warm. "You don't need to thank me. I did what anyone would do." "That's not true," he replied quietly. "Most people wouldn't stop on a stormy night alone with their children in the car. You did." Before she could answer, the hotel's front desk phone rang, and she excused herself to answer it. When she turned back, he was still there, still studying her like she was a puzzle worth solving. Later that evening, after her shift, she found him waiting outside by her car. It made her uneasy. but his hands were in his coat pockets, his stance relaxed. "I'm not here to bother you," he said. "I just needed to see how you live, to understand who you are." Naomi didn't invite him in when they reached her apartment building, but he caught a glimpse through the open door. The narrow kitchen with peeling paint, the thrift store couch, the two girls at the table doing homework by the glow of a single lamp. He smiled, not in pity, but in a way that told her he saw something she didn't expect him to. "You have a good home," he said simply, and before she could think of a reply, he tipped his head in a quiet farewell and walked away into the night. Naomi stood in the doorway for a long time after, the hum of the lamp filling the silence, wondering why she felt like something had just shifted inside her life, and why she couldn't decide if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. It was another week before Naomi saw Daniel again. This time, she wasn't surprised. Something told her that the night on the highway wasn't finished with her, that their paths had crossed for a reason neither of them yet understood. It was Saturday afternoon, and Naomi had just returned from the laundromat, a basket balanced against her hip, the girls upstairs arguing over a board game. She set the basket down in her living room and froze. Daniel was standing there, by her kitchen table, as if he belonged. Her first instinct was to bristle. "How did you get in?" "Your neighbor let me in," he said, almost sheepishly. "She recognized me from the news." Naomi sighed, brushing past him to set the basket on the couch. "You can't just show up like this." "I know." He paused. "But I needed to talk to you. Really talk." Something in his voice made her stop. It wasn't the polished tone of a businessman used to getting his way. It was lower, heavier. He sat down at the table, his hands clasped in front of him, staring at a point beyond her. "That night," he began, "it wasn't just an accident. I wasn't just driving home." He exhaled slowly, his shoulders loosening as if letting go of something he'd been holding for years. "I was running." She stayed standing, arms crossed. "From what?" "From someone who wanted me gone. A man I trusted. My business partner. He framed me for embezzlement. Millions, supposedly missing from the accounts. I had proof he was behind it, but he had people. People who don't mind getting their hands dirty." Naomi felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft from the window. "So the crash. He chased me off the road. Or rather, one of his men did. I was lucky you came along when you did." His eyes met hers. "If you hadn't, I might have been gone before anyone found me." She searched his face for a lie but found only exhaustion. It struck her then. This was not the man the tabloids painted as untouchable. This was someone stripped bare, more human than powerful. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you're the only person who's helped me without wanting something in return," he said quietly. "Everyone else in my life measures me in terms of what I can give them. That night, you didn't ask for my name or my money, you just pulled me out." Naomi didn't know what to say to that. The kettle on the stove began to whistle, and she moved to shut it off, grateful for the distraction. Behind her, Daniel added, "I'm clearing my name, slowly, carefully. But I'm also rethinking my life. And I think you might be part of that, if you'll let me." She turned to face him, arms braced on the counter. "I don't need saving." "I'm not here to save you," he said, his gaze steady. "Maybe I'm here to learn what that kind of courage looks like." The room was quiet for a long moment. The hum of the refrigerator. The faint sound of the girls upstairs. Rain beginning to tap against the window again, like an echo of the night they met. Naomi realized then that whatever road lay ahead, this man was not going to disappear from her life. Not until whatever brought him here had run its course. And part of her, against all logic, wasn't sure she wanted him to. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's presence in Naomi's life became something she hadn't planned for, but couldn't ignore. It started small, a phone call to say he'd arranged for her old sedan to be repaired, the bill mysteriously covered. Naomi almost refused, but the truth was, the car's failing brakes had been a silent worry for months. She told herself it wasn't charity, it was safety for her girls. Then came the school letters, official-looking envelopes addressed to her daughters. Inside, Confirmation of full scholarships to Brookfield Academy, a private school with a reputation for academic rigor and a sprawling library the girls had only ever seen in pictures. Naomi called Daniel immediately, her voice firm. "This isn't necessary," she told him. "They're fine where they are." "They'll be more than fine," he replied. "They'll have options. And isn't that what you've been fighting for all these years?" The question stung, not because it was unkind, but because it was true. Still, Naomi made her boundaries clear. "I don't want to be a charity case. If you're going to help me, I want to earn it." That was when Daniel made her an offer she couldn't dismiss. A position managing a small, underperforming property in his company's portfolio. The pay was more than she made cleaning rooms, and the hours meant she could actually be home for dinner most nights. Her first week was a whirlwind, learning the tenants' names, balancing ledgers, discovering that the building's leaky roof had been ignored for years. Naomi attacked the job the way she attacked everything in life, with quiet persistence, sharp observation, and an unwillingness to let problems fester. Within a month, rent collections improved, maintenance requests were handled promptly, and even the crankiest tenant had started greeting her in the hall. Daniel noticed. He began stopping by the property once a week, not to check up on her, but to ask her opinion. On leases, on renovations, on whether he should keep certain properties at all. He seemed lighter around her, as if the act of talking to someone who didn't measure him in net worth gave him space to breathe. For Naomi, the changes were practical but profound. The steady paycheck meant she could replace the peeling linoleum in the kitchen, buy Lila a new pair of sneakers without choosing between that and groceries, and finally fix the second-hand washing machine so trips to the laundromat were no longer necessary. But the transformation wasn't just in the things she could now afford. It was in the way she carried herself. She no longer moved through her days braced for the next financial blow. She laughed more with her daughters. She found herself looking up instead of down when she walked into a room. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Naomi stood on her apartment balcony, watching Maya and Lila chase each other in the courtyard. Daniel's voice broke through the hum of cicadas. He was leaning against the railing a few feet away, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up. "You've changed this place," he said, nodding toward the building below. "And you've changed me too." Naomi didn't answer right away. She just watched her girls, their laughter carrying upward, and thought about the road that had led her here. It had been dark, wet, and dangerous, and yet somehow, it had been the start of everything. 1 year later, the ribbon fluttered in the late spring breeze, its deep red satin gleaming under the sunlight. Naomi stood beside Daniel, scissors in hand, the murmur of a gathered crowd filling the air. The words on the banner overhead read, "Whitaker Harris Community Center." Bold, proud, permanent. She had pitched the idea months earlier, almost shyly over coffee in Daniel's office. A place where single parents could find free tutoring for their kids, job training, and childcare so they could work without fear. She'd expected polite interest, maybe a promise to look into it. Instead, Daniel had leaned forward, eyes alight, and said simply, "Let's build it." Now, the building behind them was alive with possibility. The front windows were thrown open, letting in the scent of fresh paint and the sound of children's laughter from the playground out back. Inside, volunteers bustled between rooms, a bright learning center lined with bookshelves, a kitchen for free meal programs, a multi-purpose hall that could be anything from a classroom to a safe haven on stormy nights. Maya stood near the front, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing the navy blazer of her new school. Lila was beside her, clutching a paper program, her eyes wide with excitement. Naomi caught their gaze and smiled, the kind of smile that carried 100 unspoken words. "We made it." The mayor spoke first, thanking Daniel for his generosity. Daniel in turn nodded toward Naomi. This was her vision, he said into the microphone. Her courage, her insight, her refusal to give up. That's why we're standing here today. Naomi felt her throat tighten. Public speaking had never been her strength, but when Daniel offered her the microphone, she took it. She told the story in simple terms. A rainy night, a broken car on the side of the road, a choice to stop when no one else did. She didn't mention his wealth or her hardships. She spoke about human connection, about how the smallest moments can change the course of a life. When the applause came, it was warm and genuine. She and Daniel cut the ribbon together, the crowd cheering as the doors swung open. Later, when most of the guests had gone inside, Naomi and Daniel lingered at the edge of the sidewalk, watching a group of children race toward the playground. "You could have walked away that night," Daniel said quietly. "So could you," Naomi replied. "But we didn't." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll keep building, Naomi. Not just buildings. Lives." She didn't answer, but the smile she gave him said enough. For the first time in years, she didn't just feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. And she knew the road ahead, whatever it brought, would be walked with her head held high. The sun dipped lower, catching the edges of the red ribbon still tied to the fence, fluttering in the wind. A reminder that some bonds, the ones forged in the most unexpected moments, can change everything.